Hey there, my name is Jen. I am a fourth year who was assigned to the VA when I was on my core rotation. And I don't know what you've heard, but I was terrified when I found out I was going to go to the VA. I had a couple friends that made sure to let me know that Shark Tank was the absolute worst and they had never been more humiliated and they were so embarrassed and it was absolutely terrible and they were so sorry that I had been assigned there. But I'm here to tell you everything was fine. I survived. I made it. I'm here to tell the story. Shark Tank was definitely not as bad as I thought. I think personally that the VA is a great exposure to general surgery, and when you're trying to figure out if you want to be a surgeon or not, you really have a couple options. So general surgery, applying into that, or applying into one of the subspecialties. And I was really glad that I got to have my rotation at the VA because it's great exposure to general surgery and see if that's something that you're interested in. Three main things I want to talk about in this video. Number one, how do you survive without Epic? Number two, how do you deal with clinic when you can't even pre-chart? That one is a hoot. And then number three, Shark Tank. The team is pretty big. When I was there, there were 2 chief residents, a junior resident, and 2 interns, plus a PA student. So there was about 6 of us at any time, and that made it challenging in terms of the workspace. There were 5 computers, and then there was also a PA that was there. She would usually, Margot, if you get to meet her, she's absolutely wonderful. She would get there around rounding time and she would leave by 4, so there was an extra computer when she left, but during the day it was very challenging to have enough workspace for everybody. Another advantage of the VA is that it's a little bit slower than OHSU, so things you'll notice at the VA happen slowly. The electronic system is slow, turnover can be a little bit slow, clinic is definitely slow, so I'll chat about that. So number one, how to survive at the VA without Epic, and what I mean by that is no home access. So Epic you can access on Citrix at home, so after a long day in the OR you can go home and look up your patients and cases for the next day, but you can't do that at the VA. So unfortunately this one just kind of sucks and you just have to stay a little bit longer after your OR cases to look up even who your patient is. For more details, you can watch Henry's video, but you want to be able to answer who is that patient and why are they on the operating table, like what management have they tried and failed requiring an operation. I didn't find that a lot of the attendings asked me that, but if they did, that's an absolutely fair question. And so that was always my goal when trying to pre-chart on patient information, was being able to answer those basic questions of who is this patient, why are they here, what have they tried. Moving on to actual concrete tips that are helpful for the VA. Looking up the surgery schedule is very helpful on CPRS, and there's actually a whiteboard in the resident room where you should write down what surgeries are happening, what attending and what time, and which OR. You can ask the intern to teach you the first day during orientation, and once they do, you should take ownership of that for the rest of the rotation. You can also ask your chief resident during orientation if they prefer to assign you to surgeries or if they're okay with you choosing the surgeries that you will scrub into every day. Most residents will say you can choose because it's one less thing for them to do, they're super busy. If they let you choose, that's great because not only will you be writing these operations on the board to help the team, but you can also make sure that every Friday when you write them up, you and the student that's with you, whether it's a PA student or another medical student, don't leave that room until you know who is doing what operation or who's scrubbing into which operation, so that you can use the weekend to look up any procedures you are not familiar with and will be scrubbing into. It just helps with planning purposes. In terms of the exact schedule I used, I'll take you day by day. I'm not sure if you'll have a golden weekend or not during your 3-week rotation, but basically you will be there 6 days a week. So Friday tends to be lighter in terms of operations, and there are no operations scheduled, at least on the weekend. So because Friday is lighter, one, you can leave earlier, but I decided to use this time to not be rushed during the weekdays. So I made sure to look up the schedule, like I said, on CPRS, put it on the whiteboard because by Friday there will be fewer changes for the following week's operations. I made sure to pick out my schedule with the other student in mind, of course, and then I would look up my Monday and Wednesday patients on Friday evening. Patients' information, not necessarily their procedure, but their information like who they are, why they're getting this operation, what they've tried, what their comorbidities are, stuff like that. And it didn't have to take forever, it was a brief. And then I used the weekend to look up any procedures that I wasn't super familiar with, make sure to have some of the anatomy reviewed, and then Monday afternoon, evening, after rounds and after the OR, stuff like that, I looked up Thursday and Friday's cases because Tuesday, like I said, is clinic, so Monday evening at home, you can't really prepare for clinic. If you haven't been to the VA, they have CPRS, which you can't access from home, but also they have paper check-ins, so there's no way to look up a patient before they even arrive. So you can't pre-chart in any sort of way. So I used that Monday evening time, since there was no operation the next day, I didn't have to look up procedures and anatomy. I used that time to look up information for Thursday and Friday patients. And then I did it all over again. So that allowed me to at least have the patient information done and out of the way so that I didn't have to stay extra long after a long OR case after evening rounds and still stay to look up the next day's patient information. In terms of procedures and anatomy, I mean, I definitely had to come home and review that, but that's pretty standard for any service you're on, whether it's the VA or not. These tips are mostly for how to navigate no Epic and no home access. Lastly, I'm not sure if Margot will still need a PA there, but they usually have a PA on the service, and she is an absolute gem. She can help you set up a template of some sort. It's not quite a dot phrase. It's as good as a dot phrase can get at the VA, but it's super helpful if you just ask her about it. She's happy to email you the template and show you how to set it up, and then it'll make your notes a little bit easier to write. Another word on notes, so if you don't have the first case of the day, that's great. Feel free to write your notes as fast and as soon as possible, just because residents have to sign them or co-sign them. And the last thing they want is to stay there longer just to co-sign your notes. So try to get those done as soon as you can between operations if possible. All right, the second topic is clinic. So this one is challenging because, like I said, you can't pre-chart for it, and you won't even know who's coming in or who's scheduled to come in until they show up, and the nurses put a paper chart that has a name and the social, and you look up the patient. So you can't really prepare for this one except 5 minutes before you go into the patient, do a quick pre-chart and go in and talk to them. You will only see new patients. You won't see any follow-ups or any post-op checks or anything like that. And it's pretty standard. The expectations are not that high. You will staff patients on your own, so there is no like you go see them and then you tell the resident goes sees them and then you guys present together. Like, it's very crazy and everybody is doing their own thing, and if you see an attending, you just grab them real quick and say, hey, I have a patient I'd like to staff with you, and it flows. So they really do treat you like a resident for clinic, and you just do the best you can. It's pretty crowded in there. They share a space with other clinics, and so at least for my co-student and I, we were like sent to a corner, and sometimes they forgot about us and they never offered lunch, so feel free to be proactive and say, hey, I'm gonna take a quick lunch break, and then come back. Don't go the whole day expecting them to say, go take a lunch break, because that might not happen, and then you're gonna be exhausted and not eat. So be mindful of that. And also communicate well with your co-students so that you guys can switch off. Each one can get a patient at a time, and you'll be responsible for writing the note as well. So write it as quickly as you can so that you can get ready for the next patient. But in general, because you're only seeing new patients, it doesn't get as hectic for us students. It gets very hectic for everybody else who has to see every patient. I will have a document with all of this written down in case it comes at you lightning speed, but things to ask for new patients super briefly. Number one, what is the reason for the consult? You'll usually get this from the referral, hopefully, if the person that filled it out was thorough. If not, try to get as much history as you can from the chart of their PCP. Otherwise, just ask the patient like why they were referred. Again, brief HPI, a review of systems with an emphasis on any heart disease issues, so any coronary artery disease, any stent history, CHF, make sure to know the last ejection fraction, anticoagulation treatment, if they have hypertension, diabetes, if so, what's their latest A1C, is it well controlled or not, just to get a ballpark, any lung issues, so COPD or emphysema, asthma, stroke history, do they have any residual deficits, any hepatic disease, cirrhosis, renal disease, surgical history. A lot of vets forget, or they'll just say no, and so I usually made it a point to ask, do you still have your gallbladder and your appendix? And sometimes they're like, oh yeah, actually they did take out my appendix. So sometimes vets forget, and I just usually ask for those two since they're the most common. Any social history, so smoking history, how much and how long, alcohol, illicit substances, how far away they live. This is really important because it helps with pre-op planning. So if they live very far and they don't have a way to get here, then it might be the most logical thing to have them come the night before, have a family member drop them off, versus them having to wake up super early to take a bus to get here on time for pre-op. So things like that can be helpful in pre-op planning. And then their transport situation in terms of post-op. Are they going to go home? Is someone there to take care of them, to pick them up, to drive them home? Do they need to go to a SNF? Stuff like that. So I like to ask about transportation to the hospital and back home. All right, and last but not least, number 3 is Shark Tank. So this was a big source of anxiety for me from what I had heard from my classmates, but it's gonna happen whether you like it or not. It's best to just prepare as much as you can within reason and you know what you know and you don't know what you don't know, and you can't make up knowledge on the spot, so it'll be okay. Go in, try your best, and know that you will not know the answer to everything. Interns won't know the answer, residents won't know the answer, the attendings will argue among themselves, and it'll be fine. So the way that the other student that was on service with me and I did it, we looked at our call schedules, and so we came in on a Monday. They're not going to make you prepare a presentation for Tuesday since Shark Tank happens every Tuesday, so that week was nixed. But the following 3, we just looked at our schedules. I was on call first, so it didn't make sense for me to present the second Tuesday if I had been on call the weekend and I was just tired. So she took that first weekend, and then I took the next weekend, and then we made a decision about the third week. But I think for you guys, since there's 3 weeks instead of 4, it would work out just fine. Regardless, figure out who's going to do it when. Don't put it off and then the weekend before say, oh hey, you should do it this Tuesday, and then not be prepared. So having a plan is great. And then both the PA student and I decided to do a PowerPoint presentation. It's not necessary, you don't have to. In fact, you can even use one of the HNPs that you present to your attending for the HNP presentations. But we found that if we used a PowerPoint presentation, one, it shows that you put in effort to present information, and so they might be a little less aggressive and less likely to interrupt you, although I can tell you I did not get to slide 3 or 4 before somebody chimed in and asked me questions, and there was discussion going on. So I would say if you do choose to do a PowerPoint slide, 20 to 25 slides max. It's a whole hour, but you won't get through it without interruptions, and be prepared for that. So don't take a ton of time into making this a wonderful 100-slide presentation, because you'll only get through a quarter of that, if even. So that's what I found helpful. It helped me organize my thoughts. I definitely used an HNP that I presented to an attending, and the attending knew that I was going to use it, and he was very helpful and supportive and said, oh, you should mention this, have you thought about that? Which was very helpful because I had articles going into the presentation and was able to have some discussion points. Another pro tip is if you make a statement or even pose a question on a controversial topic or controversial in medicine, it's great because the attending will start arguing and that'll take some time away from your hour, and you can take a breather and collect yourself and keep going. So something fun to include. For me, it was, I think I did mine on small bowel obstructions and the use of gastrografin, and some attendings were super pro gastrografin and some were, where's the evidence? I don't think it's important. And there was a nice discussion going on there, and I just took a breather, collected myself, and then kept going, and it was just fine. Those are really the tips I have for Shark Tank. It can be any topic. It doesn't have to be news breaking. In fact, if it is common, it's better just because there's a lot of discussion that can happen, a lot of questions that can come from it, and you won't have to know all the answers to everything. So take a deep breath, it'll be fine. The VA actually is not as bad as I thought, and I hope that you have a wonderful experience.